Well, we knew that Mr. Sir was going to take out his anger on Stanley for the scratch from the warden, right? We knew he was going to get vengeance somehow. And at the end of chapter 24, we saw that Mr. Sir poured the water on the ground instead of filling up Stanley's canteen. And it's a little bit hot out there. Stanley's getting a little bit thirsty. I guess it's a good thing that Mr. Pendanski comes and fills their water canteens up occasionally, too. Otherwise, Stanley really would be in trouble, wouldn't he? Whew. All right. So now we are ready to start chapter 25, which I gotta tell you, the book's getting ready to get juicy. Are you ready for the book to get juicy? So remember how I said Holes kind of goes back and forth, present day with Stanley, but then it also goes back in the past as well? Okay, so we're getting ready to go back into the past. It says, there was a doctor in the town of Green Lake 110 years ago. His name was Dr. Hawthorne. And whenever people got sick, they would go see Doc Hawthorne. But they would also see Sam, the onion man. Onions! Sweet, fresh onions! Sam would call as he and his donkey, Mary Lou, walked up and down the dirt roads of Green Lake. Mary Lou pulled a cart full of onions. So we know that we are in Green Lake. There is a doctor, Dr. Hawthorne, but there's also this man named Sam, who, with his donkey, Mary Lou, sells onions. Sam's onion field. You're right. In that pre-read thing we did, think way back, we talked about onions, didn't we? Well, this is the first time we've heard about onions since we did that, isn't it? Onions are going to have to play a part somehow. Sam's onion field was somewhere on the other side of the lake. Remember, the lake is still there. Once or twice a week, he would row across the lake and pick a new batch to fill the cart. Sam had big, strong arms, but it would still take all day for him to row across the lake and another day for him to return. Most of the time, he would leave Mary Lou in a shed, which the Walkers let him use at no charge, but sometimes he would take Mary Lou on his boat with him. Sam claimed that Mary Lou was almost 50 years old, which was, and still is, extraordinarily old for a donkey. She eats nothing but raw onions, Sam would say, holding up a white onion between his dark fingers. It's nature's magic vegetable. If a person ate nothing but raw onions, he could live to be 200 years old. I don't know that I'd want to live to be 200. And I definitely wouldn't want to be 200 if the only thing I ate was raw onions. Yuck. Sam was not much older than 20, so nobody was quite sure that Mary Lou was really as old as he said she was. How would he know? Still, nobody ever argued with Sam either. And whenever they were sick, they would not only go to Doc Hawthorne, but also to Sam to get some of those onions, right? Sam always gave the same advice. Eat plenty of onions. He said that onions were good for digestion, the liver, the stomach, the lungs, the heart, and the brain. If you don't believe me, just look at old Mary Lou here. She's never been sick a day in her life. He also had many different ointments, lotions, syrups, and pastes, all made out of onion juice and different parts of the onion plant. This one cured asthma, that one was for warts and pimples, another was a remedy for arthritis. He even had a special ointment which he claimed could cure baldness. Just rub it on your husband's head every night when he's sleeping, Mrs. Collingwood, and soon his hair will be as thick and as long as Mary Lou's tail. He just compared hair to Mary Lou's tail. As thick as Mary Lou's tail. Yeah, it's a simile. Doc Hawthorne did not resent Sam. The folks of Green Lake were afraid to take chances. They would get regular medicine from Doc Hawthorne and onion concoctions from Sam. After they got over their illness, no one could be sure, not even Doc Hawthorne, which of the two treatments had done the trick. Doc Hawthorne was almost completely bald, and in the mornings his head often smelled like onions. So even Doc Hawthorne was using Sam's ointments. Whenever Catherine Barlow bought onions, remember that we were talking about Miss Catherine Barlow, the school teacher, she always bought an extra one or two and would let Mary Lou eat them out of her hand. "Is something wrong?" Sam asked her one day as she was feeding Mary Lou. "You seem distracted." "Oh, just the weather," said Miss Catherine. "It looks like rain clouds moving in." "Me and Mary Lou, we like the rain," said Sam. "Oh, I like it fine," said Miss Catherine, as she rubbed the donkey's rough hair on top of its head. "It's just that the roof leaks in the schoolhouse." "I can fix that," said Sam. "What are you going to do?" Catherine joked. "Fill the holes with onion paste?" Sam laughed. "I'm good with my hands," he told her. "I built my own boat. If it leaked, I'd be in trouble." Catherine couldn't help but notice his strong, firm hands. They made a deal. He agreed to fix the leaky roof in exchange for 6 jars of spiced peaches, which, if you remember, she was known for her spiced peaches. It took Sam a week to fix the roof, because he could only work in the afternoons after school let out and before night classes began. Sam wasn't allowed to attend classes because he was an African American, but they let him fix the building. Again, remember, this is over 100 years ago. Times were different. Thankfully, they've changed. Miss Catherine usually stayed in the schoolhouse grading papers and such while Sam worked on the roof. She enjoyed what little conversation they were able to have, shouting up and down at each other. She was surprised by his interest in poetry. Whenever he took a break, she would sometimes read a poem to him. On more than one occasion, she would start to read a poem by Edgar Allan Poe or Longfellow, only to hear him finish it for her from memory. She was sad when the roof was finished. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No, you did a wonderful job," she said. "It's just that the windows won't open. The children and I would enjoy a breeze now and then." "I can fix that," said Sam. She gave him 2 more jars of peaches, and Sam fixed the windows. It was easier to talk to him when he was working on the windows than it was when he was on the roof, right? He told her about his secret onion field on the other side of the lake, where the onions grow all year round and the water runs uphill. Didn't someone else talk about a stream of water that ran uphill? The beginning of the book. Madame Zeroni did, didn't she? She talked about a stream running uphill. Well, when the windows were fixed, she complained that her desk wobbled. "I can fix that," said Sam. The next time she saw him, she mentioned that the door doesn't hang straight, and she got to spend another afternoon with him while he fixed the door. By the end of the first semester, Onion Sam had turned the old rundown schoolhouse into a well-crafted, freshly painted jewel of a building that the whole town was proud of. People passing by would stop and admire it. "That's our schoolhouse. It shows how much we value education here in Green Lake." The only person who wasn't happy with it was Miss Catherine. She had run out of things needing to be fixed. She enjoyed spending time with Sam, didn't she? She sat at her desk one afternoon listening to the pitter-patter of the rain on the roof. No water leaked into the classroom, except for the few drops that came from her eyes. "Onions! Hot, sweet onions!" Sam called out on the street. She ran to him. She wanted to throw her arms around him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she hugged Mary Lou's neck. "Is something wrong?" he asked her. "Oh, Sam," she said, "my heart is breaking." "I can fix that." She turned to him. He took hold of both her hands and kissed her. Because of the rain, there was nobody else out on the street. Even if there was, Catherine and Sam wouldn't have noticed. They were lost in their own world. At that moment, however, Hattie Parker stepped out of the general store. They didn't see her, but she saw them. She pointed her quivering finger in their direction and whispered, "God will punish you." So if you think a little bit to Virginia Studies, you've talked in Virginia Studies about abolitionists, and you've talked about slavery, and you've talked about the Civil War and how things in our country have changed since that time. Well, if we go back a little over 100 years ago to when this book takes place, then we see that there were things that were still happening in our country that were like what you learned about from the Civil War. And the thought of Miss Catherine being with Sam the Onion Man was against the rules during this time. And thankfully, things have changed. But not so good for Sam and Miss Catherine, because now they've created quite a scandal in Green Lake. Maybe perhaps their scandal could have something to do with Green Lake not being a lake anymore. I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out in Chapter 6. Jump on over to the next video to see what happens.